Now that we finished reading chapter 11 and half of chapter 12, I believe we know very well who Bud Lawrence is and how Bud Lawrence tried to trick everybody in the city by pretending that he owned the word Frindle. So let's look at the first question that said, how did Bud Lawrence use Frindle's popularity to make a company? If we were going to answer this question, I think we'd have to start off by saying that Bud Lawrence was a very rich businessman who lived in the same city as Nick and heard about the popularity of Frindle. He went to his lawyer and he had a company made, and the small little company started selling cheap plastic ballpoint pens, specially printed with the word Frindle on it. As the word became more and more popular, we found out that Bud Lawrence would start having a huge problem. Bud Lawrence couldn't pretend that he was the one that invented the word anymore, because you're going to find out when I continue reading the rest of chapter 12 that Nick went on television, and anybody that saw him on television knew that he was the one that invented the word. Look at your book again, page 75, the middle of the page. As they sat there on the couch, Mrs. Allen had her foot on top of Nick's under the coffee table, and if she pushed down, it meant that the reporter had just asked a question that she was going to answer for him. Mrs. Allen did not trust reporters. "So tell me, Nick, why did you make up this new word Frindle?" asked Alice Lunderson. Nick gulped and said, "Well, my teacher, Mrs. Granger, said that all the words in the dictionary were made up by people, and that they mean what they mean because we say they do. So I thought it would be fun to just make up a new word and see if that was true." Turn to page 76. "And were you surprised when Mrs. Granger got mad about that?" asked Alice with a smile. There was a push on Nick's foot, and his mother said, "We never felt that Mrs. Granger got angry. When everyone started using the word Frindle, it just got to be a disruption, that's all. She's really a very fine teacher." "Yeah," said Nick. "I mean, I learned a lot about words, and without her, I wouldn't have." "So what's next for you and the new word?" Alice was wrapping it up. She could see that Nick and his parents were not going to be pushed into saying anything controversial, so she just kept it light and happy. So you see, boys and girls, Alice, the reporter, was trying to be a troublemaker. She wanted Nick and even Nick's parents to say really mean things about Mrs. Granger, but nobody could be tricked because Nick and Nick's parents were really smart. "Well," said Nick, "the funny thing is, even though I invented it, it's not my word anymore. Frindle belongs to everyone now, and I guess everyone will figure out what happens together." Alice also had a short chat with a worried-looking Mrs. Chatham and a smiling Bud Lawrence, maker of the official Frindle. Then she shot her opening bit and her closing bit, and the camera crew drove back to Carrington to edit all of the pieces and put them together into a 2-minute news story. So you see, boys and girls, the reporter not only interviewed Nick and Nick's parents, she also had to speak to Mrs. Chatham and to Bud Lawrence, who was the one that made those thousands of pens. Page 77. The next night, when all the serious news about wars and oil prices and world food supplies had been talked about on the CBS Evening News, the anchorman looked into the camera and smiled. The anchorman, boys and girls, is the person that reports the news on television. He's the one that is in charge of giving everyone that turns into that station all of the information. He said, "It is believed by many that the word quiz was made up in 1791 by a Dublin theatre manager named Daly, and he bet someone that he could invent a brand new word in the English language, and he chalked up the letter Q-U-I-Z onto every wall and building in town. The next morning there it was, and within a week people all over Ireland were wondering what it could mean, and a new word had been created. Quiz is the only word in English that was invented by one person for no particular reason, that is, until now. Now there is a new word, Frindle, and here is Alice Lunderson in Westfield, New Hampshire, with the story. Alice came on the screen with a short introduction. Then right there on TV, Mrs. Granger and Nick and Bud Lawrence and Nick's mom were talking to 20 million people about Frindles. One of those 20 million people was a producer for the late night show with David Letterman. And another one of those 20 million people was a staff writer for People magazine, and another one was for a writer for 321 Contact magazine for kids. Dozens of other writers and producers and marketing people saw the story on the news, and all of them smelled a great story. During the next 3 weeks, every man, woman, and child in America heard about this funny new word that kids were using instead of the word pen. And kids in Ohio and Iowa and New York and Texas and California started using it too. Bud Lawrence was suddenly flooded with orders for anything with the word Frindle on it, and he quickly got interested again. But there were complications. Bud's lawyer said, "You see that stack of orders there? Trouble. That's what that is. We got a trademark filed, but it's only like an application. The whole country knows that that little kid made up the word, and unless you make a deal with his dad, you're going to end up with nothing, maybe even a big, fat lawsuit. That kid owns the word." So you see, boys and girls, here we're getting to the answer to question number 2. The problem that Bud Lawrence was going to have, the problem that Bud Lawrence was going to face, was that if he started selling things with the name Frindle on it, what could probably happen was that Nick would find out about it, tell his dad, and his dad would go to a lawyer, and the lawyer would have to sue Bud Lawrence for stealing the word Frindle and trying to make money from it, which is what we call a great, big, fat lawsuit. Look at the bottom of page 78. You'll have time to fill out these next 2 questions, the first 2 questions on your sheet after we finish the chapter. When Mr. Allen came home at lunchtime, his wife told him that he had to call Bud Lawrence. It's something about the new word. This was not good news to Tom Allen. He was sick and tired of all the fuss, and being away from the hardware store so much while all this nonsense was happening had put him weeks behind on his paperwork. He'd be lucky now to get his Christmas order in time. Even though he didn't really want anything to do with it, Bud was an old friend. So on the way back to the store, Nick's dad went to Bud Lawrence's office. "Tom, good to see you," said Bud. He stood up and walked around his desk to shake hands. "Have a seat." Tom sat down uneasily, and Bud pulled another chair over. "Ever seen Westfield so stirred up about anything in your life? You and Ginny must be pretty proud of that boy of yours." Bud couldn't remember Nick's name. Tom, which is Nick's dad, shifted in his chair and nodded. So Tom is not feeling very comfortable talking to Bud about all this Frindle stuff. So when we say Tom shifted in his chair and nodded, it means that he's kind of moving around in his chair, feeling very uncomfortable. Yes, he's quite something, that's for sure. But I tell you, Bud, I'm ready for all of this to just die down and blow away. Just too much fuss. So Nick's dad is not really happy about all of this. Instantly, Bud saw how to get what he wanted. Well, Tom, I'm afraid it's not really going to go away. Looks like something started up, and people are real interested. You probably saw those bright red ballpoints around town with the word Frindle on it. That was my doing. Just testing the waters. But your boy, he owns that word. I got my lawyers to apply for a trademark a few weeks back because that's just the way I am. New things comes along, I'd like to be right in the middle of it. He grinned at Tom Allen, and Tom smiled back weakly. Right now, I got a shirt printer in Massachusetts and another one in Chicago and another one in Los Angeles making t-shirts with the word Frindle above a picture of a pen. I mean a Frindle. Each supplier has orders so far for over 20,000 shirts. Profit on every one of those is going to be $2, maybe $3. I am talking with some big pen and pencil companies in Hong Kong and Japan about a deal that could be worth some really big money. They've seen this Frindle thing in the media, and they want to buy the rights to the trademark and make a new line of Frindles for kids. I'm not kidding. This is hot. Hot idea. So boys and girls, what's happening is with every day that goes by, thousands and thousands of children and adults are starting to figure out that this word Frindle is like really, really cool. And because it's such a cool thing, what they want is maybe a t-shirt with the word Frindle on it, or the pen itself, or maybe there's going to be lunch boxes with the word Frindle on it. It's going to be so popular that the people that are making anything with the name Frindle on it are going to become really rich. Bud guessed right. Just the thought of all this made Tom shrink back uncomfortably in his chair. It was way too much fuss. So what's happening here is that Nick's dad isn't really interested in making a lot of money. He's just like really happy being a dad and looking after his kids and his store and stuff like that. He's not really interested in going out and selling t-shirts with the word Frindle on it. Look at page 82. Tom, let me be direct with you. As the boy's guardian, you need to do the right thing about all this. I'd like to see where all this is going to go. I'm going to take some risks, spend some money, see what happens, but I need your permission. I need your signature on these trademark papers, and I need to strike a deal with you about permission to use that trademark. So boys and girls, trademark is the name Frindle. Trademark means the word that is invented belongs to Nick because he's the one that invented it. Just like the person that invented the word Nike owns that word. Nobody else can put the word Nike on anything except for the company that owns that word. Tom as Nick's dad has to be the one to allow Bud to sell the things with the word Frindle on it. So Bud can make some money, and then maybe what he's going to do is share the money with Tom. But we're going to have to read and see what happens. Is Bud going to be honest about it, or is he going to keep all the money for himself? I know it seems like a big ruckus about a word, but we just can't tell what's to come of it unless we take some steps. Bud pointed at the papers on his desk. That's a contract, and it's fair and honest. It gives your boy 30% of whatever profits I might make. That's a fair royalty, generous for this kind of deal. So boys and girls, if Bud sells something for $10, Nick is going to get 3